We have users, but we have no way of letting them log in. So that's the next thing that we need to implement for our application. And we're going to start with the view model because we want to use the model binding features that we used in the previous lesson with the sign up view model. So right click on the view model folder and add a new class, and we will just call this login view model. And there are only two properties for this class, the username and the password. So we will add those. We will also want to add some attributes for validation, but primarily we just want to validate that there is a value there. So we just want to make these required. So let's create the password property, and then let's add the required attribute to the username property. And let's set the error message to equal please enter your username. And then for the password, we will do something similar, except that we will say password instead of username. That's all we need for this class, so let's go ahead and close it. And now we just need to add the form. But we can't really do that inside of our layout page. We don't have a model to work with. In fact, the model that is going to be used for this layout page is going to be dependent upon the view that is using this layout page. And a view can't have more than one model. And this is going to cause a slight little issue with our landing page because we are going to have two forms on the landing page, our login form as well as our sign up form. Those are using two models, so we're going to have to combine those two together. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. Let's create another view model, which I'm going to call login sign up view model. And it's basically going to have two properties. One is going to be of type login view model, and the other is going to be of type sign up view model. And I'll just paste those properties in. But that isn't enough. Whenever we want to use this model, the login view model and the sign up view model actually has to have an object there so that we can work with those. So let's create a constructor that will allow us to pass in either an existing login view model or sign up view model. And if we don't pass an existing model, then we will create a new one. So login sign up view model. Let's start with the login view model, and we'll just call this login. We'll initialize it as null, and we will do the same thing for this sign up view model. We'll call this sign up and set it as null as well. Then we will set login equals login, or we will create a new login view model. And we will do the same thing for sign up. And because we've made this change, this is going to force us to change our landing view and our home controller. So let's first go to the landing view, and let's change the model from sign up view model to login sign up view model. And then we will need to modify our text box for method so that we use m.signup.email and username and so on and so forth. Although IntelliSense isn't liking this just yet, but whenever we build this, those red squigglies go away. So let's go to our home controller, and let's modify that as well. For the landing page, we no longer want to pass a sign-up view model, we want to pass a login sign-up view model. But we still have an issue as to where we want to put the login form. We could create a partial view that contains our form, and the model for that partial view could be of type login sign up form, and then we could pass a model to that partial view. But there's a slight little problem with that approach. We won't always have a model of type login sign up form, but we can kind of get around that. We can do something like this. Let's create a variable called model, and then we can take our model object and try to cast it as type login sign up view model. If our model is a login sign up view model, then this will give us that object. Otherwise, it will give us null. And if it is null, then we can just create a new login sign up view model. And then we could call the html.partial method. We can call this underscore login partial and then pass in model. By the way, the underscore in front of a view name is a Microsoft convention. It's for the views that are not actually served to the client. They're used in other ways. Like underscore layout is a layout page. It's not directly served to the client. The same as the view start and partial views. And I'm just following that convention here. So let's create this partial view. This needs to be a shared partial view. So let's add that there. So add view. We want to call it underscore login partial. This is a partial view. This also needs to be strongly typed as login sign up view model, and then click add. Let's first create our form with a using statement. Var login form equals html.begin form. The action is login, and the controller is account. And we are going to use the text box for and the password for methods. So html.textbox4. This is for our model.login.username property. And let's go ahead and set the placeholder text to username. For the password, we will use the password for method. We will specify the m.login.password property. And for the placeholder, we'll set it as password. And then finally, we just need a submit button to log in. And that's our form. Now we just need to go to our account controller and make some modifications there. First, we need to modify our signup method to accept a login signup view model object, and then we need to implement the code for logging in. So open up account controller, and we'll change the parameter type to login signup view model. Whenever we return the landing view, we need to modify this model as well. And we'll simply create a new login signup view model, and we'll set signup to model.signup. We're doing this because the model that we get as an argument has a null login. So we just can't pass the same model back to the landing view because our login partial is expecting a login object. Although a simpler solution would be to just create a new login object, wouldn't it? So we could do model.login equals new login view model, and that would just solve that. So never mind about this. We don't want to have this more complicated version. So get rid of this constructor, and we'll just use the default constructor whenever we want to create one of those objects. And then we can create a variable called signup and set that to model.signup. Then we can use this variable in place of model where we need to do that. And there we go. So our login method is going to use this same logic, or at least a slightly different logic. But it's going to have the same structure. I guess that's the words that I'm looking for. We first want to check if the user is authenticated. If they are, then there's no reason to log in. But we do need a parameter of type login signup view model. We'll call this model. And instead of setting the login, we want to set the signup to a new signup view model. We'll change this signup variable to login, and we'll set it to model.login. We'll check if the model state is not valid. If it's not, we will go back to the landing page. We don't need to check if the user exists in this case. In this case, we want to authenticate the user. So if not security.authenticate, we want to pass in the username, so login.username and login.password. And we still want to add a model error, but we want to say that the username and or password was incorrect. And instead of creating the user, we want to log them in. So we'll call the login method and pass in the username. And that's it as far as the implementation. So let's run this and let's see if it works. We have our landing page with the two forms. Let's just click on the login button and let's see what happens. We get an error because I didn't verify that dadgum anti-forgery token. Or at least I tried to validate it, but I didn't add it to the form. So let's go to our login partial. Let's call the anti-forgery token method. So let's run it again, and let's try the login button once again. That's the behavior that we expected. Let's go ahead and click on the create account button, and we should get different error messages. So our model validation is working fine. Let's ensure that we do not log in with bogus credentials. So I just typed in something, and that did not let me in as well. So now let's put in our actual credentials. The password is password, and we get the not implemented exception inside of the index action method. So we are logged in now. Our next step is to create and view Ribbits, or at least view our timeline. And that's where we will pick up in the next lesson.